Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Pria and I am 17 years old. I'm an 11th grade student at Chestermere High School and I am in my first year of RVSLA. What most of you don't know about me is that I was once an addict. I wasn't addicted to any drug or substance, but I was addicted to portraying myself a certain way and living a lie. So, let me reintroduce myself. Hi, I'm Pria. I'm 17 years old and an 11th grade student at Chestermere High School. I'm in my first year of RVSLA and I am also a recovering perfectionist. To provide some context to my presentation, I would like to briefly talk to you all about Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous rehabilitation programs. 12-step programs are implemented internationally in Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous to support individuals recovering from substance abuse in their journeys, to help them face the repercussions of their actions, and to guide them in making peace with their mistakes. There are 3 specific steps about these programs that stick out to me, which I also think many of you, who I see traits of myself in, may also find useful. Step number 1 is acceptance. My story and its intertwinedness with perfectionism began at a very young age. I was quite gifted as a little girl. I could recite, revise, and connect multitudes of information to elaborate worldly topics, most not aired on children's TV channels. I possessed naturally strong social skills and could formulate complex conversation with not only kids, but also adults. However, perfectionism first hit me like a truck when I developed a knack for getting good grades. I was a teacher's favorite, and a Pria, will you please be in our group kind of classmate? These traits, which became a part of who I am, progressed throughout the years. I became a strong student in my middle school years, excelling in leadership and community service. I also continued to get great grades. Everything was easy for a person like me. That's the delusion that bites so many people like us when they end up where we are today, obsessed with the idea of on top or nowhere. In high school, my perfectionism took a turn for the worst. I was juggling school, work, extracurriculars, and mass amounts of homework, all in the span of 7 days. My sleep schedule became derailed. I had immense brain fog. I had to quit dance, an activity that eased all my stresses and was an important part of sustaining my already deteriorating peace of mind. But no amount of overwork and pressure was going to make me average. My schoolwork may have been difficult, and it may have caused me to quite literally alienate all the other valued aspects of my life. But no matter what it took, I was not going to get only an 80. All of my commitments that couldn't be paused or quit on began bearing down on me alongside my schoolwork, and my grades began slipping like they never had before. This absolutely shattered my self-esteem. The self-esteem that for years had been built on being one of the smartest kids in class and one of the most gifted students my teachers had ever seen. And because of the notion that I was just naturally perfect at everything, when I was offered the chance to participate in the Remembrance Day assembly at my school, it was a no-brainer. Obviously, I was going to participate in the assembly, and I was going to rock it. I needed this to go well. It seemed as though my entire existence as perfect Pria was teetering on my acing this poem in front of the whole school. On the day of the assembly, the gym is full to brim with peers, teachers, and local members of law enforcement. I am waiting by the side of the stage, ready to get on and read the poem I'd been practicing every day for weeks. I'm feeling confident in my abilities to recite this poem perfectly, just as I had recited every single piece of writing in front of a crowd before perfectly. I get up on the stage and I start reading. I'm down to the last 4 lines of the poem and I lose my place. I'm scrambling internally because this has never happened to me before. I've always read perfectly. Lost and unsure of where I was, I announce "sorry" into the microphone. I then quickly read my remaining lines and bolt off the stage. I escort myself out of the gym full of my entire school, and there I was inconsolable. I'd never failed at public speaking before, and this was the first time I ever experienced failure in something I thought I'd mastered. I was horrified, upset, I struggled to manage my emotions and fell apart. This was my turning point. This was when I knew I had to take the first steps to overcome my perfectionism and accept myself for who I am and all of the failures that have contributed to making me, me. Most of these failures and mistakes are less than graceful instances that I've tried my best to conceal and forget about. when in reality, I wouldn't be me without having gone through those experiences. In that specific moment of emotional turmoil and disbelief outside of the assembly, I had to admit to myself that perfection is an unattainable feat. I had to admit that if I wanted a healthy life, I must aim to adopt a mindset where I'm not compromising my health and fun just to be the best at everything. I had to convince myself that my mind and body also deserved rest after all of the years I spent being go, 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 win, win, win. Remembrance Day 2022 was a day that I learned failure is a synonym to success, and to have fully succeeded at something will never mean that you're also perfect at it. Lesson number 1 for any recovering perfectionist: accept that perfection is a fantasy. No matter how smart or gifted you are, no matter how natural your skills come, nothing will suffice in the everlasting effort of trying to be perfect. Step number 2 is willingness. While I knew that I needed to change my perfection or nothing mindset, I didn't really know how. I told myself I was willing to change, but in all honesty, I wasn't sure if I actually could. This was until I experienced volunteering at the Calgary Drop-In Center through RVSLA. It was 5 a.m. on the really snowy morning of December 17th, 2022. My mom and I are up and ready to go volunteer at one of the daily breakfast services, which happens for members of our community who are going through the experience of being unhoused. Many members visibly dealing with pain, addiction, and loss, all on top of being homeless. My mom and I get to the shelter, hang up our coats, and get ready to volunteer. We brought in a big bag of our own donations and sat it down on a bench in an employee's office. See, I've always been great at organizing volunteers, planning donation drives, and telling people where they need to go when they get somewhere, but do I ever volunteer actively in an event or activity of such nature? No. I was always behind the scenes, until today. Now, the fixed mindset, perfectionist version of Pria wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have signed up to serve breakfast at the shelter to people going through a brutal Alberta winter unhoused. She would have loved to organize volunteers and share this opportunity with her more willing peers, but she wouldn't have taken it up directly. And I'd like you all to know that the statement I've just made was not meant to come off in a snobby manner. In fact, it's quite the opposite. My entire life, I've always been a very empathetic person, and with that, incredibly emotional. At any given moment, I am a dam of tears waiting to overflow. This was something that I viewed as a downfall to my abilities prior to this entire experience. You see, I wouldn't have volunteered before because I knew that I would be a complete mess seeing this many of Calgary's unhoused population, who are all somebody's child, mother, father, sibling, or grandparent, living through such a disheartening situation. And the truth is, I chose to volunteer, tried really hard to keep myself together, but ended up crying the whole time. You can ask Miss Curry. I cried with every tray of cereal and juice that I brought out. I cried every single time someone said thank you to me, and I cried every single time I looked over at my mom, who was so incredibly appreciative of this opportunity, knowing that we would leave the shelter, not having to worry about where we would be sleeping tonight. The whole time I was at the drop-in center, I also had a lot of other thoughts. One of them was, I cannot believe the gravity of struggle that so many people, some only a few years older than I am, have to endure. Another was reminiscent of perfectionist Pria. I thought, gosh, now these cool, smart year threes think I'm a crybaby. But the main thought in my mind that whole morning from 6:20 to 8:20 a.m. was how lucky am I to be so thankful for all that I have in my life and to have actively participated in such a grounding experience. The fixed mindset, perfectionist me would have been too worried about my overly emotional demeanor, but the recovering and attempting a growth mindset version of me saw past something that my previous self may have considered a flaw and was willing to ensure that it did not inhibit me from growing, thus supporting me in becoming a better person and leader. When we were getting ready to leave the shelter, I was putting my last stack of trays back on the cart, and I quickly smiled at someone. Keep in mind, my face was fully tear-stained, and my fuzzy purple sleeves were soaked from wiping my face for 2 hours straight. Suddenly, this man, whose grace and kindness, even in his situation, I will forever admire, told me to keep on smiling. I will remember that man in the shelter forever because he didn't see that I cried too much or I hadn't done this kind of thing before. He just saw my smile. He saw me in what could have been called my most imperfect state and still had something kind to say. The truth is, we are all better people and leaders for allowing our personal struggles and emotions to be exhibited. We do not connect through having shared 4.0 GPAs. We connect through our ability to be vulnerable. We connect through being empathetic, kind, and truthful about what makes us, us. I, for one, am now glad that I felt so deeply during that experience, because no matter how hard I try to hide my emotion for the fear of being too much, I'm not a robot. I'm a person who feels for people, and nobody should ever be ashamed or embarrassed to show their heart. Because of that man, I will now go back to the shelter as much as I can every holiday season. I'm willing to treat my emotions and vulnerability as a strength instead of a weakness. This entire experience taught me that I had to forgive myself for letting my perfectionism come in the way of truly allowing me to experience things, simply because I didn't want my less put together and articulate side to show. Lesson number 2 for any recovering perfectionist: be willing to try. Embrace any opportunity you have to grow. Don't let previous experiences and negative self-perceptions hold you back from anything, especially the fear of being perceived as stupid or incomposed. We are all incomposed people, desperately trying to hold pieces that are meant to remain broken together. I would also like you all to remember never to demean yourself for showcasing your heart, especially in all its violent emotion and sensitivity. It is a thing that leads and connects us through every step of life. Step number 3 is maintenance. Finally, to attempt recovery from perfectionism, I had to continue reminding myself that my best was good enough and that I was good enough. No matter how much I embarrassed myself the last time I did something that was out of my comfort zone, or how bad of a grade I got on a test or quiz, I had to keep reminding myself to take each bad thing as a lesson. And here is where I want to pause us for a moment so you can see in real time how my perfectionist, fixed mindset is still something that I work on overcoming. You just heard me describe a grade as bad, which inherently attached a worth to it and caused me to measure myself based upon a number. My entire life, my addiction to achieving perfection has resulted in my becoming a very type A individual and leader. When I have tried to expand my limits or face my fears by trying new things and duly failed while doing those things, I don't usually try my hand at those tasks or similar ones again. Me coming up here today is a demonstration of step number 3, maintenance. This is me facing my fears and leading with vulnerability. I have taken my Remembrance Day mishap, which is something that I would have previously defined as a bad thing, and turned it into a lesson. I have taken a situation, a mistake, which would have previously limited my abilities, and have turned it into something that has liberated me from the shackles of a safe zone. Lesson number 3, and the final lesson for any recovering perfectionist. In attempts to become perfect, we lose who we really are. You are not defined simply by a bad experience or how high of a number you can score on a standardized test. You are not defined by the unscathed way you present yourself to the world, but rather the authentic way that you share yourself with it. Because of this idea, I now try not to measure myself or my achievements by numbers, amount of errors, or what I could have done better. Instead, I choose to measure myself through the impact I work to create and the change I attempt to foster in my community. This also means embracing all of the emotion, failure, and mistakes that have shaped me into the leader and person that I am today. So, I will tell you all now, from immense experience going back to about December of 2022, that the imperfect you, which you may be trying to hide, is the truest person that you'll ever be in your lifetime. Imperfect is perfect, because it's really who you are. In the words of Drew Dudley, you should work incredibly hard to make your grades extraordinary, and then you should work twice as hard to make them the least impressive thing about you. So, instead of trying to be perfect, friends, try to be you. To introduce myself for the last time, and I promise it is the last time. Hi, I'm Pria, and I'm a recovering perfectionist. What are your stories?